When you think of superpowers, you probably picture modern nations with massive economies and militaries. But what if I told you the world's very first superpower emerged thousands of years ago, along the banks of a single river? We're talking about ancient Egypt, a civilization that dominated the ancient world for nearly 3,000 years. And no, it wasn't just because of their giant pyramids or godlike pharaohs. The real story of their rise to power is far more fascinating, and it all begins with a gift. The Greek historian Herodotus famously called Egypt the gift of the Nile. He wasn't exaggerating. This incredible river was the lifeblood of the entire civilization. Every year, predictable floods would deposit a layer of rich black silt along its banks. This silt was a natural superfertilizer, making the land incredibly fertile. While their neighbors in the Near East struggled with unpredictable rainfall and harsh climates, the Egyptians enjoyed agricultural abundance. They could reliably grow massive surpluses of grain, especially wheat and barley. This surplus was the foundational brick of their empire. It meant not everyone had to be a farmer. People could specialize. This led to the rise of scribes, priests, artisans, soldiers, and engineers, the very people needed to build and run a complex state. The pharaoh, who was seen as a living god, controlled this grain surplus. It was stored in massive granaries and became the basis of the entire economy. In a world before currency, grain was wealth. It was used to pay laborers who built the pyramids, to fund the army, and to trade with other nations. If you controlled the food, you controlled everything. But the Nile was more than just a food factory, it was also a superhighway. Flowing north into the Mediterranean, it provided a natural transport route. At the same time, the prevailing winds blew from north to south. This meant Egyptian sailors could easily travel up and down the river. They could float north with the current and then raise their sails to be pushed back south by the wind. This efficient transportation network unified the kingdom, allowing the central government in cities like Memphis or Thebes to project its power across hundreds of miles. It enabled the rapid movement of troops, trade goods, and building materials, like the massive stone blocks for temples and tombs. Without the Nile, moving those stones from quarries in the south to building sites in the north would have been nearly impossible. This combination of food security and internal connectivity gave Egypt a massive head start. While other fledgling states were busy just trying to survive, Egypt was thriving. This stability allowed their culture and technology to flourish. They developed one of the world's first writing systems, hieroglyphics, to keep track of taxes and grain stores. They became masters of engineering and architecture, not just building pyramids but also intricate irrigation canals to expand their farmland even further from the river. Their knowledge of astronomy, born from the need to predict the Nile's floods, led to the creation of a 365-day calendar, a system so accurate it's the basis of the one we use today. Geography also played a crucial defensive role. To the east and west, Egypt was flanked by vast, inhospitable deserts, the eastern and western deserts. To the south were the cataracts of the Nile, a series of rocky rapids that made river invasion from that direction extremely difficult. To the north was the Mediterranean Sea. These natural barriers acted like giant walls, protecting Egypt from foreign invasion for much of its early history. This security allowed the kingdom to develop for centuries with relatively little outside interference, creating a unique and deeply stable culture. While empires in Mesopotamia were constantly being conquered and replaced, Egypt's splendid isolation gave it a sense of continuity and permanence unlike anywhere else in the ancient world. With a stable food supply, a unified kingdom, and secure borders, Egypt was perfectly positioned to project its power outward. The pharaohs of the new kingdom, rulers like Thutmose III and Ramesses II, weren't content to just sit behind their desert walls. They built powerful, professional armies equipped with bronze weapons and fast, lightweight chariots, a military technology they had actually adopted and improved upon from foreign invaders, the Hyksos. These pharaoh generals launched ambitious campaigns into the Levant, which is modern-day Syria and Israel, and south into Nubia, a land rich in gold, ebony, and ivory. They weren't just raiding. They were building an empire. They established garrisons, appointed vassal kings, and demanded tribute. This tribute, a steady flow of gold, silver, timber, and exotic goods, flowed back to Egypt, making the pharaohs unimaginably wealthy and further cementing their power. The temples of Karnak and Luxor, covered in carvings of victorious pharaohs smiting their enemies, were essentially propaganda billboards, showcasing Egypt's imperial might to the world. For centuries, Egypt was the undisputed superpower. Its wealth was legendary, its culture was influential, and its military was feared. It engaged in diplomacy and trade with other great powers like the Hittites, the Babylonians, and the Mitanni. The Amarna letters, a collection of clay tablets discovered in Egypt, reveal a complex international system where Pharaoh was addressed as brother by other great kings, but was clearly the first among equals. They begged him for Egyptian gold, which they said was as common as dust in his lands. So, how did this mighty empire eventually fall? No empire lasts forever. A combination of factors led to its decline. A series of internal succession struggles weakened the central authority of the pharaohs. The rise of a wealthy and powerful priesthood, especially the priests of the god Amun-Ra, began to challenge the pharaoh's economic and political control. Externally, the world was changing. New waves of invaders like the mysterious Sea Peoples swept across the Mediterranean and the Near East, disrupting trade routes and destabilizing entire kingdoms. Egypt fought them off, but the wars were costly and draining. Later, new empires armed with superior iron weapons, like the Assyrians and then the Persians, rose to challenge Egypt's dominance. The Bronze Age, which Egypt had mastered, was ending, and the Iron Age was beginning. While Egypt did adopt iron, it never quite regained the absolute military and technological edge it once had. Its natural barriers were eventually breached. The Persians conquered Egypt in 525 BC, and then nearly 200 years later, Alexander the Great arrived, ushering in a new era of Greek rule under the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ended with its most famous ruler, Cleopatra. Finally, in 30 BC, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. But even in its decline, the legacy of the world's first superpower was undeniable. For 3,000 years, ancient Egypt was a beacon of civilization. Its recipe for success: harnessing natural resources, creating a unified and stable state, developing advanced technology, and projecting military power became a blueprint for empires to come. From the pyramids that still touch the sky to the knowledge we inherited, the gift of the Nile continues to shape our world. The story of ancient Egypt is a powerful reminder that the foundations of power are often built not just with swords and stone, but with water, grain, and ingenuity. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.